As I come to the end of my 1 week trip here to the Isles of Scilly, and as a first timer to the islands, I've picked up on some tips and tricks that I think would be helpful to other people who are planning a first time trip to the Isles of Scilly's. Number 1, book your accommodation as early as you possibly can. We booked our accommodation as soon as the bookings opened 11 months ahead through Scilly Self-Catering, and we only had one option left by the time we booked at 6 o'clock in the morning. If you're not wanting to come during peak school holidays, you might have better luck not booking quite so far in advance, but certainly if you want to travel during prime time like myself, get in there early. Number 2, head straight for the tourist information that's right on the edge of Porthcressa Beach here in Q-Town. They have a weekly event schedule which goes over things that are quite unique to that week that if you come at any other point during the year, you probably wouldn't be able to see, and therefore it's a hive of information. Tip 3, join the Isles of Scilly notice board Facebook group. People will often post in there if people have lost things and they're able to get lost property back to their owners. And of course, when people have gotten stuck with all of the cancelled flights on that Saturday, some families through that Facebook group have been able to step in and put a roof over people's heads who otherwise were struggling to find somewhere to sleep. Tip number 4, if you're interested in going out to Bishop's Rock and you see that there is a sailing, take the opportunity to do it whilst you can. The Boatmen's Association won't take passengers out to Bishop's Rock unless the seas are pretty calm, and it has been known to go for weeks on end with there not being any passenger sailings out to the lighthouse because of how choppy the seas can get. So if you see the opportunity, take it, because for the remainder of your holiday, the opportunity might not come up again. Tip number 5, if you think that you might be taking 10 or more boat trips whilst you're here, go to the Boatmen's Association kiosk and buy them in bulk. If you buy 10 or more, they end up being slightly discounted, and particularly if there's 2 of you travelling together, that means that you would only need to visit 5 islands in order to get that discount. Tip number 6, speaking of money, always make sure that you've got some loose change on you, because the amount of honesty boxes that are dotted around the island is huge, and not all of them do offer ways in which you can get change, as some of them it's just a slot that you pop the coins into. So by having the loose change, it means that you should always have exact amounts. Tip number 7, bring plenty of sun protection. I'd strongly recommend bringing a high factor sunscreen. Also bring lip balm that's got SPF in it. I would strongly recommend bringing a hat and sunglasses too. As the saying goes, 1 day at sea equals 2 days on land, and despite this place being in England, the threat of sunburn is very real. Tip number 8, if you're wanting to go and use the co-op here in Q-Town, go in at any time except for just after the boats have all returned from having visited all of the other islands, or just after the Salonians come in. At these times, that supermarket is absolutely rammed full of people, but outside of those times, it's lovely and quiet. Tip number 9, if you plan on having a takeaway in the evening, pre-order. We found that by pre-ordering, we could dictate exactly what time we wanted our food by, and it was ready at that time. Whereas when we were waiting in the queue to collect our food, we could hear people making orders there and then, and were being told that it was going to be an hour and sometimes even more than an hour's wait. Tip number 10, if you plan on eating in a restaurant, also book those tables well in advance. Post-COVID, there are quite a few pubs that used to sell food that now don't. It also is a case that some of the guest houses used to offer half board to their customers, and they also don't tend to offer evening meals either. So it just means that there's a little bit more of a squeeze on those restaurants that do offer full sit-down table service. Tip number 11, take out insurance and make sure that it's adequate. In comparison to your standard holiday, the likelihood of you having some disruption to your holiday is quite high. On average, there are cancelled flights about twice a month, and the Salonian can also sometimes be cancelled if the weather is really adverse. That means that you could find yourself needing to get accommodation for extra nights that you hadn't planned for, and if it's not part of your budget, then it's really important that your insurance is going to be able to cover it. To give you a little bit of an idea, we got caught out and we ended up in a much fancier hotel than what we would normally stay in, and it was considerably more expensive than what we usually budget per night. The nice thing knowing though is that we do have insurance, so we're not going to have to fully foot that bill. Tip number 12, bring spare clothes and definitely spare underwear. Going along the lines from the last point of making sure that you've got insurance, if you are needing to stay for an extra day or two, you'll want to make sure that you've got some spare clothes that are still quite clean to be able to wear on those extra days. And my final tip is to bring seasickness tablets. Even if you're planning on flying in and out on the islands, you never know what could happen. We'd planned to come in on the Skybus, which was a success, and then we planned to leave via the helicopter, which has not been a success. And instead, we've been booked onto the Scilly ferry. I was absolutely kicking myself for not having brought any seasickness tablets, but thankfully one of the staff members at the hotel that we stayed at last night went home, had a look, and she did have some seasickness tablets and she brought them in for me today. If you're particularly bad at getting seasick, you might also benefit from taking some, because apparently the waters can get quite choppy in between the islands. It's just that we've looked out this week and the seas have been pretty calm between the islands. I hope that these have been really helpful tips for you. If you found this video helpful or even just enjoyable, I'd be most grateful if you guys could just click that like button and give it a thumbs up, as it will then help this video spread to other people who also might find it beneficial. If you can also think of any other tips that you think other people planning a trip to the Scillies might appreciate, please do make sure that you add them to those comments below.